Mark, it's wonderful to meet you. Thank you, sir, for taking a minute out for the show today. I appreciate it.
Hey, my pleasure, Joe. Looking forward to talking to you and your listeners.
And it's always so rare to run into Kansas City folks, so it's so good that we're in the metro and we're
Yeah.
connecting. So, before we get into your life as an author and a speaker and a business leader, there's so much going on. I want to know, how did you survive the pandemic? How did that change the way that you do things? Did it alter the course that much for you?
Yeah, I would say, in general, everybody was in the same boat. This wasn't a local thing. This wasn't a red or blue thing. This wasn't a white or black thing, young or old thing. This was a global thing. And it was frightening. And I think that, every day we were told shelter in place. Wow. Those are some ominous words, aren't they? And so I remember sheltering in place. We're turning on the news each day, trying to figure out, do we have any, closer understanding of what this thing is and how we can, get rid of it. And I think it gave all of us a bit of a timeout to reflect deeply on not only what, but who matters most in our lives.
Yeah.
And for me personally, it got me thinking about what I really feel called to do instead of what I feel required to do. There's a big difference. And so I listened to my calling, and during that time, I ended a very satisfying and wonderfully lucrative corporate C-level world to finish writing my book
Yeah.
and using it as a springboard for future consulting and coaching and speaking opportunities, right?
Yeah.
So it is called the Purposeful Growth Revolution: 4 Ways to Grow from Leader to Legacy Builder. And that really has set me on a new trajectory. And I've talked to so many other people who said something similar. And then, looking at research from the Sloan School of MIT, who did a study of 34 million people who left the workforce during COVID globally, and asked them a simple question: why? Joe, the number one answer by 10 times more than the second most given answer was toxic work environment.
Yeah.
People did not want to go back to an unsatisfying status quo because I don't know whether you got COVID or maybe someone in your family was hospitalized or, God forbid, someone you knew and loved died as a result of it. But it really changed our kind of view of our own mortality
Yeah.
and made many of us question what path we were on and where did we want to go with this, finite time that we're given on Earth.
Yeah. So, of all of these diversified paths that you've taken in life, and even right now, what was your dream when you were a kid? What did you want to be when you grew up?
I wanted to be a rock and roll drummer, to be honest with you, or maybe an athlete or something. No, um, as I got older, in high school, I wanted to be a lawyer. And so I went to University of Kansas, and they said you can't, major in pre-law. But I said, okay, well, what curriculum will best prepare me to be successful in not only getting into law school, but successfully completing it and becoming a lawyer? And they said, well, you're going to do a lot of reading, a lot of research, a lot of writing, a lot of presentations, and really a lot of overall critical thinking. I said, okay, uh, what curriculum will prepare me? And they said, well, have you thought of the School of Journalism and Mass Communications? It is one of the tops in the country, and you're going to do all those things there. So that's how I kind of got into marketing. Is I learned throughout that process, and I had a wonderful mentor at KU named Dr. Tim Bankston through the School of Journalism and Marketing Communications side of it, not news editorial. Said, you have a lot of talent in this area, Mark. Are you sure you want to go to law school? And I'm like, oh, yeah, sure. And as time went on, I started talking to people, fraternity brothers who were in law school, or maybe those who were recently out, and some who even had their name on the letterhead. Joe, nobody was happy. Nobody was encouraging. And so I went back to Dr. Banks and I said, hey, let's talk more about this grad school thing you've been, kind of talking to me about. So I ended up going to Northwestern University, which had the top program in the country. It was led by another wonderful mentor, Dr. Schultz, Professor Don Schultz, and he created the concept called integrated marketing communication, or IMC. And programs all over the world now have IMC curriculum. Well, I learned at the feet of the master, and from there went on to, uh, advertising, marketing, promotion, all forms of integrated marketing communications, and then later, really kind of settled in on being a chief marketing officer or chief concept officer, or strategic officer, or president or CEO, and those experiences helped mold me based on some caring mentors that walked alongside me, saw something in me that maybe I didn't see in myself, and got me thinking, well, this is really what I'm called to do.
Yeah. What's the best advice you've ever gotten?
Mark, ask more questions. Ask good questions and be curious.
Yeah.
And there's a great movie in the 90s. It's called Glengarry Glen Ross with Alec Baldwin and Jack Lemmon and other notable performers. And Alec Baldwin was kind of the boss of this kind of dial for real estate, kind of call center in New York. And one day, when the performance wasn't up to snuff, he goes in there and he gets at this on a dry erase board. He writes ABC on there because you know what that stands for? Always be closing. And so I love that scene, and it's pretty iconic for those who remember that movie. But I changed, instead of closing, I changed it to curious.
Yeah.
Always be curious
Yeah.
and listen and learn more than you speak. And that's been difficult for me as someone who likes to speak, but it's
Yeah.
probably the best advice I'd ever gotten.
Of all of these years of doing jazz radio, anytime I talk about Miles Davis, the one thing that comes out about him is that he was an impeccable listener.
Mm. The birth of the cool.
That's it, man. That's how he got
Miles
it.
Davis. Yep.
He
He
honed
was
it.
smooth, man. I did not know that about him. And you and I were talking about before we came on. I took a class called History of Jazz at KU. And I grew up with a love of jazz growing up in Wichita. We had the Wichita Jazz Festival each year. And it was something my dad loved. And so if he loved it, I loved it. And he'd take all of us to the jazz festival and we'd sit outside and listen to just some incredible performers that, most people would go, wow, they were in Wichita.
Yeah.
Yeah, they were. And so hearing that about Miles Davis, who was someone I always admired, that's very cool,
Yeah, for
literally
sure.
and
Yeah.
figuratively.
So speaking of icons like Miles, who's been that hero for you in your life for the success that you've had? Who's been that inspiration?
Boy, I'll tell you, that's tough. I've had many. I'm gonna name it a couple, and they are acknowledged in my book, by the way. One of them is a gentleman named David Novak, and he was the head of marketing at Pizza Hut. And I worked for him in Wichita when Pizza Hut was still headquartered there. And he was so inspirational. You just want to run through a brick wall for the guy. He had a craving for big ideas, and he would always say, Mark, it's big ideas that move businesses. You got to think big. And then he was also big on recognition and reward. Later, when he became the co-founder and CEO of Yum Brands, when PepsiCo divested the restaurant group, which is KFC, Taco Bell, and Pizza Hut, he would give out a different award for each of the concepts. So there was a kind of a cheesehead award, like you see the Packers fans wearing. For Pizza Hut, there was a rubber chicken award. For KFC, and there was something else for Taco Bell. It was like a sauce packet award or something like that. He'd take his picture with the person who won the award each month, and then he'd put it up in his office. Well, when he got too many pictures on the wall, he put them on the ceiling. When he
Wow.
got too many pictures on the ceiling, he put them up and down the walls in the hallway outside of his office. And so that carried with me because I was one of those recipients early days when I was at Pizza Hut, and he gave out what was called the Silver Pan Award. And he brought me up in front of the whole marketing department and said, this is why Mark has won the award this month. And I remember feeling like I was on cloud nine. So recognition and reward and making people feel like they belong and that they're special and that they add value was really, really, really good. Another one was another David Overton, who was the founder and uh, chief executive officer and chairman of the Cheesecake Factory.
Yeah.
When I worked for him as the chief marketing officer, I just remember how hard he worked. Here was a guy that has accomplished so much, but every day he would carry 4 or 5 different yellow pads. And in meetings, he'd be scribbling notes on different pads. And as I learned, each pad was for different areas of the business. And he would always ask, is this the best it can be? And the answer was always no. So I learned about attention to detail, hard work, and creating a high bar of excellence and always striving to reach higher. And so I would say those two gentlemen had the most impact on my view of leadership and building teams and building brands in that order.
So let's take it a step further. What has been that consistent energy for you every day to wake up, to do your job, to do it well, and to evolve as a human being?
Yeah, I don't remember how many years ago, Joe, but I wrote my own purpose statement. And it was, I don't want to just make money and retire. I want to make a difference and inspire. And that means making a difference in the lives of others and inspiring them to want to do likewise. So it's creating this virtuous cycle of reciprocity, or what I call paying it backward. Like people say, well, Mark, isn't the phrase pay it forward? And I say, no, it's pay it backward. And here's why. I'm a big growth junkie. I love growth in all of its forms, spiritual, relational, personal, and professional. But I'm also a copy junkie. And I like copy in all of its forms. And so when I go to Starbucks, I will intentionally, this isn't a random act of kindness, it's an intentional act of kindness. And I go to the drive through, I'll pay for the car behind me. I can't pay for the car in front of me, they've already gone. So I'm actually paying it backward. And I'll get up to the window and I'll say, just tell them, God bless you, your debt has been paid. And then I'll drive away and I'll say a silent prayer for that person or people in the car. I don't know them, they don't know me, but I got to believe, Joe, that in that moment, they feel valued and that someone cared enough about them to not only bless them with a cup of coffee or two, but an actual blessing. It had to impact their life. And I know when I tell the people at the window, they get a smile on their face and they say, oh, that's so nice of you. And yes, I will say that to them. And then who knows where it goes from there?
Yep.
I've heard that people pay for the car behind them and the car behind them and the car behind them. So it's creating this ripple effect.
Yeah.
And so that idea of, not wanting to just make money and retire, for me, it would be criminal if I just took what I knew, the hard-earned wisdom from the good, the bad, and the ugly that I've gone through, from the pinch me moments that I couldn't believe I'm actually living this life, to some incredibly painful gut punches where I couldn't believe that just happened.
Yeah.
I want to give that back. So paying it backward to help others along their growth journey is what gets me up every day. It's the light that shines and burns through the deepest, densest fog when I'm having a not so good day, because my goal is to impact lives and help people find purpose in both their life and their work. And in doing so, help make the world just a little bit better because they were in it.
In the very beginning, when I started my show in 2011, one of my first interviews was with the legendary flutist Hubert Laws. And in
Hmm.
the beginning, it was hard because I wasn't established. And I just kept thinking, wow, I'm going to interview this guy. And I couldn't believe it. I was like, what pulled him in? Just that whole thing, you're just playing the skeptic and you're devil's advocate. But we get on the phone. And at one point, he said somebody at the car wash in LA saw him and noticed him. And they were talking. And he basically made a proclamation that at this point in my life, I'm not holding on to it anymore. I'm giving it away.
Yeah.
And all of its myriad, just like what you said, he's just out there giving the stories, giving the love, letting people have it. And I definitely felt it in that conversation. And that's the beauty of it. And a lot of that conversation fueled my love of wanting to continue this arc of wanting to talk to the musicians, and it's great because you don't know what kind of ripple is going to happen, what other people are going to do, like holding the door for somebody. There's always that chance that it can get passed on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's why, I'm not downplaying random acts of kindness, like when the spirit moves you, but when you have an intentional act of kindness and you're intentional about just being kind, it
Mhm.
just happens and it rubs off on people.
Yeah.
And for me, no one's going to remember the third quarter earnings in 19 whatever,
Yep.
but they're going to remember something more about you. And it's the great American poet, Maya Angelou, God rest her soul, who said, I have learned that people will forget what you've said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel.
Exactly. Exactly. So, speaking of you, everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, everyone that reads your book, everyone that you've worked with, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
Well, first and foremost, I'm a child of God, and I'm also the son of some wonderful parents who are no longer with us, and I'm a brother and father, and I'm all those things. Um, but I think I'm someone who's still learning. I'm someone who still has so much to learn and so much more room to grow. As a growth junkie, I oftentimes have to tamp that down because as I've kind of gotten older, I realize that I have been on such a tremendous tear. And I'm now trying to slow down a bit and savor simple moments and give myself more grace. I've been a type A plus serial achiever and still recovering perfectionist all my life. And I realized that my self worth doesn't come from being as productive as I can be each day. It comes from just being the best Mark Mears that I can be each day in whatever shape or form that means. And it will be enough.
Yeah. So let me ask you this, since we're both centric here in Kansas City, if you could go back in time and see one event in Kansas City's history with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen?
Oh my gosh, there's so many.
Yeah.
What would it be? I could pick a couple of the Royals World Series
Yeah.
wins or many of the Chiefs now, football world championships or uh, great moments in entertainment history or whatnot. Um, Boy, there's so many. I'm going to say I would love to have been able to go watch a Kansas City Monarchs game
Yeah.
and see some of the Satchel Paige and some of the Negro Leagues baseball players who are finally now getting their due, and
Yeah.
to see what role that played here in Kansas City. I think that kind of might be one of my favorite times to go back to.
That's a great answer. I would almost like to see Walt Disney down at Electric Park for the first time. You know, when all the dreams of theme park was going through his head,
Yes,
that was the beginning.
and he worked for the Kansas City Star
Yeah.
and got fired.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's
Isn't that
weird how that,
amazing?
yeah, it's crazy. Crazy how all that begins.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan. That's a really good answer. I'm a huge fan of Walt Disney and just what he created. I
Yeah.
mean, think about that.
Oh, it's
And
crazy.
it takes a team. No one does anything by themselves. I get it, but it was his vision,
Yes.
and he was really instrumental in creating entertainment in its form today, not
Uh-huh.
just movies, but the theme parks
Yep.
and making the movies come to life through the exhibits and the rides and whatnot. And I was fortunate enough to be the senior VP of sales and marketing for Universal Studios Hollywood. So Disney was our competitor.
Yeah.
But I also did a lot of promotions when I was at Pizza Hut and other companies with Disney, films. And I marvel at the excellence that has been sustained long after his death.
It's
And
crazy.
that's the mark of someone who's a legacy builder.
Yep.
And it's not something, legacy is not something you bequeath after you're dead and buried, something of value that goes to people that you love. It, it's a living legacy
Yeah.
that you have every day. And Joe, I don't know about you, but all I know, and I don't know much, but I know that we all have 24 hours in a given day.
Yep.
Not one of us has 1 minute more, not one has 1 minute less.
Yep.
And it's how we use our day and live the life that we're called to live and help others along their growth journey. That's a living legacy. That's that ripple effect that I talk about. That's
Yeah.
that purpose that drives me every day. And I know several other people who feel likewise, but I'm leading what I call the Purposeful Growth Revolution. And I believe that you can find purpose in both your life and your work. And in doing so, pay it backward to help others along their growth journey.
And that's the name of the book, The Purposeful Growth Revolution. I encourage everyone to pick up a copy. If anyone wants to reach out, any of the good business in your world, where can they go?
Yeah, I'd say two things. One, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Follow me. I'll follow you. Let's connect because I want to keep this conversation going and I want to learn from you.
Yeah.
Likewise, if you'll go to my website, it's markamears, MEARS.com. And there you'll find a purposeful growth self-assessment. It takes about 5 or 6 minutes to fill out online. And when you're done, I'll send you back a customized PDF report with your scores and some helpful growth tips, or what I call seeds for growth, from me. And this gives you kind of a benchmark on where are you at with regard to this concept of purpose in both life and work. And where can you go and where do you want to go from here?
Wonderful, Mark. This has been so illuminating. Thank you, sir, for your story, for your time. Best of luck with the book and everything else. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe. Great
Yeah,
to meet you. And
great to meet you.
I wish you all a happy Thanksgiving and